wise druids who helped their leaders in their mission to conquer. The history of the island of Ireland is marked by magic and mystery. According to some myths and legends, the origin of the people dates to the descendants of Noah. The island was the destination of immigrants from the most diverse places in the world: Greeks, Iberians, and even from the Far East. These people tried to settle in the beautiful Irish lands. At first, everything seemed to go well. But taming the island's nature was no easy task. Plagues and dark creatures ravaged these populations. Some of these settlements were totally ruined. But some clans managed to overcome adversity, establishing themselves solidly in the Irish lands. Among them were the Firbolg, descendants of the legendary Nemed, the Scythian explorer who set sail from the Caspian Sea to settle in Ireland. The Numidians were a brave and persistent people. They were challenged by monsters, rival clans, and pirates. But these disputes brought the people of Nemed even closer together. They spread across the island, and new tribes and clans were formed. Nemed's descendants prospered and divided the island between them, dominating Ireland. But their priests sensed that there was a new force coming to Ireland, capable of tipping the balance of power. Having set out from the legendary Northern Islands, the Tuatha De Danann, known as the sons of the goddess Danu, arrived in Ireland. Protected by a magical haze, the Tuatha landed safely on the verdant island. These new people were composed of strong, beautiful men and quite skilled in the arts of metallurgy. Their weapons and props were meticulously crafted and made. These men had the blessing of the gods and landed with divine magical artifacts. Among these treasures were the Stone of Festiny, which revealed the most diverse prophecies, the mighty Spear of Assal, the unbeatable Sword of Light, and the Dagda's Cauldron, which magically produced food capable of supplying an entire army. Their warriors were strong and fearless. They did not fear death on the battlefield, something that made them formidable fighters. These invaders carried all their possessions with them, showing that this was not an exploratory expedition or a mere plunder of those lands. The Tuatha De Danann received knowledge of the druidic arts from the gods. Their paths were guided by wise druids who helped their leaders in their mission to conquer Ireland. But to achieve their goal, the children of the goddess Danu had to face a formidable enemy, the Firbolg. Nemed's descendants saw a great strange smoke in the skies rising from the coast. The Tuatha De Danann were performing a great ritual for the gods where they burned their ships. This year could only mean one thing: these invaders were here to stay, if only to die. The Firbolg decided to send Shreng, one of their strongest and bravest warriors, to make first contact with the invaders. They wanted to show how strong they were, in case the invaders insisted on staying in their territories. With his enemies. Seeing that imposing figure approaching, the Tuatha sent the warrior Bress to meet him. He was one of the bravest warriors among the sons of Danu. The warriors looked at and assessed each other, but they were not there to fight, not even to negotiate. The two warriors wanted to get to know their respective opponents better, for conflict peoples was inevitable. Despite the tension, the conversation between Bress and Shreng was friendly. They discovered that their people had a common ancestor, and that they might even be sister peoples. Bress presented the Firbolg with the proposal sent by the chiefs of his people. It was a chance to avoid a terrible bloodbath. But as a condition, the Firbolg were to cede half the island of Ireland to the newcomers. Shreng promised to take the proposal to his king, but his people were made up of brave and proud warriors. Therefore, their positions were sometimes as inflexible as a great oak tree. The two warriors bid a cordial farewell, impressed by the quality of the weapons and armor of Bress and his men. The foreigner, on the other hand, was not particularly impressed by strength, but he saw the steely courage in the eyes of Nemed's descendant. Bress told Nuada, king of the people of the goddess Danu, and the carnage could be avoided. But when Sren accepted the proposal offered by King Nuada, angry cries were heard in the gathering. Those people were proud, and the proposal was not only outrageous, but a Srang warned the tribal chiefs that the enemy was strong and had superior equipment. Dividing the lands with the outsiders seemed to people of the goddess Danu moved their camp to a black hill known as Sly Belgadane. There they erected their defenses, awaiting the inevitable conflict, and believing that that hill would be the point that guaranteed them the right to live in Ireland. The Druids of the Tuatha De Danann performed rituals to their gods, and these proved favorable to their endeavor. The Tuatha's sorcery was strong. Dense clouds poured violent rains over the heads of the Firbolg alone. Sons of Nemed. There were 3 consecutive days of torment, spotted druids sent by the invaders. They tried one last time to avoid conflict by asking them to reconsider their decision not to divide Ireland. But once again, Eochaid, the supreme chief of the Firbolg, refused. He did not wish for peace, only to see the people of the goddess Danu away from that island. The envoys proposed an armistice so that the two sides could prepare for combat on equal terms. After a fair fight, the winner would be revealed, showing what the will of the gods was. The Firbolg were honorable men and agreed to the armistice, even though it was unfavorable to them. As the truce ended, and before the great battle, young warriors from both sides met for a spear-throwing duel. They showed great agility. Firing and dodging darts coming from became the prelude to the bloodbath that followed. This small victory boosted the morale of the people of Nemed, who marched confident, were profiled and ready to fill the verdant soil chosen for battle with the blood of their body, trying to hold the defensive line with a wall of shields. Shoulder to shoulder with the invaders stood Dagda, the warrior god of precise and terrible blows. With this mighty side, the Tuatha De Danann felt protected. But the Firbolg fought with the courage of those who wanted to protect their home, and they attacked so fiercely that the invasion broke, and panic spread among the warriors. Danu's sons had lost the first fight and fled to regroup in their camp, but the war was far from over. The night after the first battle caused huge euphoria among the Firbolg. But the next morning, while Eochaid, the high chief of the Firbolg, was refreshing himself on the bank of a stream, he noticed someone approaching behind him. He turned around and saw sinister figures. They were druid assassins who wanted to kill the Firbolg leader to prevent an even greater bloodbath. The king was defenseless, and his weapon was out of range. The ambush seemed perfect. But the druids did not expect the arrival of a young Firbolg warrior who stood between the king and the 3 assassins. He fought alone against the 3 assailants. The 3 druids were killed. But the brave young man also did not resist the injuries of the heroic combat. A monument was erected in honor of the lone champion, and the hill where the fight took place became known as the Hill of Tara. The second day of fighting was as bloody as the first. Combatants on both sides perished in great numbers. Great warriors fought duels, while other warriors took part in fights so confusing that it was often difficult to distinguish between friend and foe. After a full day of fighting, both armies returned to their camps, considering themselves victors. In the camp of the Danu, the god Dagda motivated his warriors and promised to lead them to victory. But they were to stand firm and not to tremble. Srang, the brave Firbolg warrior, led the attack of his tribe. At the head of his army, he exterminated dozens of opponents. The great Dagda dueled with Kurb, a divine hero of the Firbolg tribe. The fury of the clash between the two great warriors impressed the other combatants. In the end, though he fought heroically, Kurb perished at the feet of the great Dagda. The green Irish meadows were painted red, and crows were feasting on the corpses lying breaths. One of the blackbirds hovering over the battlefield did not take its eyes off Nuada, the chief of the Tuatha De Danann. The leader of Dana's children was lost in his thoughts when he felt a strange presence. Behind him stood a woman so beautiful and seductive that she could only be a goddess. She was Morrigan, a goddess associated with war and destruction. She promised him victory in his ear and gently led him to. Nuada awoke in his bed after a night of intense love. He could still see Morrigan in the form of a raven, flying away from his tent. The king of the Tuatha De believed that, despite the difficulties imposed by the Firbolg, he would lead his people to triumph. A new day of combat began, a repeat of the previous days. Firbolg killed Tuatha De Danann, and Tuatha De Danann killed Firbolg. But a great duel was about to take place. The great Srang was ready to challenge King Nuada in combat. The king knew that victory over the Firbolg champion would be a terrible blow to the morale of his enemy, and so he advanced against him with terrible ferocity. The other combatants stopped to watch the duel. The tension in the air was enormous. Nuada and Srang exchanged brutal blows. Each of those could decide the fight at fury struck a huge blow, shattering Nuada's shield. Without protection, the king was vulnerable, and his arm was severed. The king cried out for help. One of his nobles quickly helped him, placing himself between the Firbolg champion and his king. The great Dagda also rushed to Nuada's aid. The presence of the two great warriors made Srang retreat. The king was removed from the battlefield by healing druids, and the battle continued. Bress, one of the leading warriors among the sons of Danu, wanted to avenge his king. He sought out Eoch, the Firbolg king, on the battlefield. He tried to make his way among the enemy hosts, knocking down all who crossed his path, but eventually died before he reached the king. The Firbolg king offered great resistance to the army of the sons of Danu, who at that moment seemed to have the upper hand. Exhausted and thirsty, the king withdrew from the fight to seek water. But the wizards of the Tuatha De dried up all the streams near the king, who found only muddy puddles. The king was eventually surrounded by his enemies, but he took several more of his enemies before he perished from wounds. The Firbolg armies suffered a great defeat. However, under Srang's leadership, they continued to resist. Night came again. Imminent death loomed over the Firbolg. There were few alternatives, and their hope for victory faded. To flee that land after so much blood had been spilled seemed dishonorable, and begging for their lives was unthinkable. The only honorable way out was to go to the battlefield again. Incredulous, the Tuatha De Danann saw the ragged Firbolg army again ready for a fight, won the war. Blood shouldn't be shed, and presented a peace proposal. Shreng and the few remaining Firbolg were offered a fifth of Ireland, and the promise of friendship between the two peoples. Shreng accepted these terms, and chose the Connacht region to settle. The sons of the goddess Danu would come to rule over the rest of the verdant island. Along with them, several new gods. These deities created a new arm for King Nuada, which would become known as Nuada of the Silver Arm. The blood of these brave warriors fertilized the soil of the island of Ireland. Upon this rich land, a great culture flourished, and the heirs of this tradition would become known as Celts.